Okay, and share screen.
Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Hi, my name is Sonny Kelly. I'm a scholar, writer, and an actor. I'm also the proud husband of Elena Kelly and the proud father of Sterling and Langston Kelly. And I'm the performer and writer of The Talk. I was having a conversation with my son one day. At the time, he was 7 years old, and I was taking him to a typical day of first grade. And we heard on the radio about riots in Baltimore, and the cause of all this was Freddie Gray.
The violence erupted after a funeral was held today for 25-year-old Freddie Gray. He died a week ago after being severely injured in police custody.
That moment, I had the revelation, the understanding that I had to somehow convey to my son a Black man in a world where life is oftentimes tough and dangerous, precarious. And so in that moment, I had what is commonly known as the talk with him, kind of preparing him for a world where he is seen as a threat oftentimes just because of the color of his skin. So The Talk is a dynamic one-man show that includes a performance of one person in a room with a group of people for about an hour and 20 minutes, playing over 20 characters, bringing in images, sound, literature from people like Langston Hughes, W.E.B. Du Bois, James Baldwin, and then closing out with a really important conversation with the audience after. You know, one thing that's really important to me is that everybody knows that The Talk is for you. It's for every demographic that you can imagine. And the reason why is because it's about people being marginalized and striving to be humanized mutually, to humanize each other. And one of the best compliments that anyone ever paid me was a white man who stood up in the middle of an audience after the show was over. We laughed, we cried, we had all these wonderful moments. And he said, "I want to thank you for calling me in and not calling me out." It's about us getting in a room together, having tough conversations, and staying in that room and calling each other in to community. It's about community building and unity building.
Okay, everybody can unmute, and I'm going to stop sharing. All right. Good evening and welcome to Theater Talk Live. And today we have a special guest. Dr. Sonny Kelly is joining us for a one-on-one talk. How you doing, Dr. Kelly?
I'm well. Thank you for having me, Kenneth and Michelle. It's an honor to be here. Y'all give me a blast from the past. That was one of my students at UNC Chapel Hill, Luke Buxton, an up-and-coming filmmaker who recorded that trailer you just saw. And wow, it reminds me of why I do what I do. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And Michelle Saunders joining us. How you doing, Michelle, my co-host?
I am well. So glad to be in the presence of Dr. Kelly today.
and Dr. Kelly is an actor. He's a speaker. He's a comedian. He's a storyteller. He's a teacher. He's some man. What? How many hats you got?
All by the grace of God, because I only have one head. But God is great. He's expanding my territory in many ways. People say, be careful that when you pray the prayer of Jabez, expand my territory. Be careful because he will answer, and he has.
Oh, amen. And Michelle was the one that arranged this interview. So, Michelle, take it away.
Well, Sonny, I want to say thank you for your service.
My pleasure indeed.
Thank you so much. Man, where do I begin? Well, one thing I want to say, the first time I met Sonny was I was working, just starting out at the ticket office at my job. and Sonny called and he was looking for, some dates to use the venue. And I don't know, Sonny, it's just like our conversation that was supposed to have been like 30 minutes, I think turned into an hour. And we started talking about different things, being active in the community. And I really was loving the idea and everything that you was doing. So I was pushing like, oh, we got to make this happen. And so once I started learning more about you, Sonny, of just your creativity, the talents that you have, I really honestly don't know where to begin. So what I will say is just give us a brief overview of like, who is Dr. Sonny Kelly?
Yeah.
Wow. I am a child of God. I am grateful
Amen.
to be on the planet. I'm a person who is very artistic, and I flow in the realm of poetry and performance. I love to act. I love to direct. I love to teach. I probably love teaching more than anything. I'm a son of a teacher. My father was a teacher in the Linwood School District and Compton schools in California. My mother did in-home daycare. So I'm a product of their nurturing nature. I want to build up minds and hearts and encourage people. And I've always wanted to do that. It's just taken me a while to figure out how to do that. You said I've done military service. I was an intelligence officer. I've done sales. I've done college recruitment at one point. I've done quite a few things, but I've landed on teaching. And I keep coming back to teaching because I love to see people grow. But I've also always been an actor. So when I was 12, I think I got my Screen Actors Guild card there in California. I'm from Orange County, but I would go up to Los Angeles to go to auditions. And I remember being 12 years old and I got a Levi's commercial, a national Levi's commercial, and I'm making like big money and I've got a car. So I'm like, I guess I'm an actor now. And so at the age of 12, the bug bit me. I knew I was an actor. So Dr. Kelly is certainly an actor, but first and foremost, a performer. So what I do is I write plays, I perform in plays, whether I've written them or other people have, and I perform in my classrooms. So I'm a instructor of communication at Fayetteville Technical Community College. And my students will tell you that I perform every day. I do stand-up comedy with them, for them. Sometimes we laugh at me. Sometimes I laugh at them. We just have a good time. And so I am a performer by training, but also by nature. And I always want to use my performance to teach. And I think the biggest moment where I was able to pivot and realize, oh, I don't have to switch hats between performer and teacher or performer and activist was in 2014, I believe, when we did Mike Wiley's The Parchment Hour at the Regional Theater. I played Stokely Carmichael. And that was the first time I'd ever been in a play on a stage where I saw things happening in the community and the audience. And it was by design. Mike Wiley wanted to diversify the space, as well as Tom Quaintance, who was the artistic director at that time of the theater. They wanted to diversify that audience. Many people know who live in the Fayetteville area. Cape Fear Regional Theater was a traditionally segregated theater by law in the 40s, 50s, 60s, right? Then when it became integrated or desegregated by law, Black folks still weren't coming to the theater unless there was a quote unquote Black show. And this was one of those first times where the Parchment Hour brought up a show that was about community. It was about the civil rights movement, but it was about all of us, had a diverse audience and a diverse cast. And so we saw people sitting next to each other and having conversations that never would have done it before. People from Savoy Heights, people from Haymount, right? Those are different neighborhoods in our area. And it was beautiful to see. And I'm up there on the stage and I'm dancing, and I'm singing, I'm acting, I'm looking. I cannot help but to realize I'm part of a movement.
Yeah.
Right? There's this beautiful line in the show where I say, we want to turn a moment into a movement. This is not just a moment, it's a movement. And so when that happened, I realized there's more to it. And I met some people from the cast who were part of the UNC Chapel Hill community, and some people who were studying to get their PhD at UNC Chapel Hill in communication and performance studies, which is a thing. Didn't know that was a thing. So I prayed about it, thought about it, processed some things. I was working at Fayetteville Urban Ministry at the time as a director of operations and programs at a nonprofit, because I've always wanted to help people. And everything fit into place. And I started in 2015 in the PhD program in communication at UNC Chapel Hill, and I got out. So I always say I'm kind of a three-part person. I'm a pedagogue in the sense that I teach all the time. I'm a performer. And then I'm also a placemaker. Wherever I go, I want to make a place for people to be courageous, to have courageous conversations, to move toward equity and inclusion and community building. So wherever you see me, whether I'm preaching in church or I'm just having a storytelling session for Black History Month, or you're working with artists in schools, and I'm telling the story of the eagles who thought they were chickens, and the kids are having fun. We're talking about dignity. We're talking about love, about taking care of each other. I always want to make place for change, positive change to happen. That's kind of me, Michelle.
Michelle.
Right. So I guess I was, as I'm listening to you. So do you think it was 2014 or the Levi commercial where you just like fell in love with the stage?
You know what? Here's what's funny.
When did you fall in love with, say, hey, I want to do a one
Yeah.
man, not so much on the activism side, but I mean, it all like.
It does. It coalesces. It's inextricably bound.
With one, but it's like, hey, when did I realize that I fell in love with being right here?
Thank you for asking that, Michelle. That's funny because I oftentimes will mark it as 2012, but when I think about it, that kid was just happy to be getting a check and be on a camera. That little red light goes red on the camera. And you're like, oh, it's and you do it. And I was so excited. I wanted to be a star. But then, it was when I went to Stanford and I started doing theater on the stage where you weren't making any money, but the gratification was instant. People laugh, they clap, they cry right there with you, and you can feel the connection. And I started to learn it wasn't just gratification I was looking for, it was connection, right? It was being able to have a dialogue with the audience. So I played some small roles. I wasn't really a strong actor yet. I was still learning some things. And I started to really love theater. You love something when you do it for free. And so I did theater for free all 4 years at Stanford. And that's where I met my friend Sterling K. Brown. And that's when I saw someone who loved theater. Now, see, I really enjoy it. It's part of who I am. But Sterling, I remember he lived in Harlem. He went on to, after we graduated Stanford in 98, he went on to NYU Tisch School of the Arts, and he got his MFA, Master of Fine Arts in theater. And I remember about a year after that or so, he was living in Harlem. And I went to go visit him one sweltering summer, no AC in the place, and it smelled like death in the hallway. So what is this? He said, oh yeah, somebody in apartment 1A died a couple weeks ago. They're still trying to clean that out. And he lived literally in a one-room apartment. It wasn't one bedroom, it was one room. And I looked and I said, oh, you love the craft. I like it a lot. But you love the craft. I'm going to give you a job. Right. At the time I was in the Air Force, I was lieutenant making good money. I was like, not me, but I love you. But look at him now. He's my most famous friend. But he earned it, right? And so for me, it's funny. I think he and I kind of fell in love with theater about the same time. We were both high school athletes. We were both economics majors freshman year. And then he switched to theater. I was getting ROTC scholarship, so they wouldn't let me switch to theater. But I switched to international relations, where I fell in love with learning Spanish and traveling and getting into some service with that as well. But I knew I loved the stage and wanted to return. So when I got to Fayetteville, which was my first station back in 1999, I looked for a theater. So I knocked on the Cape Fear Regional Theater door, and I knocked on the door of Lynn Pryor. And he was at the time the artistic director of the Gilbert Theater. And we were doing plays in Lynn's basement and his backyard. And that's a sweet and kind and loving man who honors and respects his actors and his directors. And so I really fell in love with the process of engaging in community theater at the Gilbert Theater, I have to say. We did some Shakespeare there. I got to lead in Shakespeare. I got to play Oberon in Midsummer Night's Dream out in that garden. Oh, mosquitoes biting you up, but I mean the craft, just the honoring of community theater and what that is, and of the words of Shakespeare was beautiful. We got to do. What else did we do? We did Taming of a Shrew. We did As You Like It, Much Ado About Nothing. So we did a lot of great shows there, and that's where I really started to go strong as an actor. I was like, oh, I'm not just that bit part kid from Stanford who just on the side is playing. Like, I can do this. And I actually had a moment there where I was thinking about acting for a living, like going to LA or New York. Then life decided to just shift and change for me. And I think I started thinking through, well, what is the life of an actor? A happy actor is a working actor, they would say. And I thought, I don't want to just do whatever's work. I want to do something more, but I didn't know what it was. I was kind of digging and searching. So the next decade or so, I spent just digging, searching, working for Fayetteville Urban Ministry, doing different jobs, working with people, started working with youth, with the Find a Friend program at Fayetteville Urban Ministry. Michelle, how you and I met. And I realized there's something in these kids. I couldn't figure it out. But I was like, there's something magical and amazing. They don't even see it. They don't even see how amazing they are. Their lyricism, their flow, the way they move through the world, their artistry, and even how they cap on each other. It's just so smart. Whether it's a Yo Mama joke or it's a poem from your heart about what you love, they have this artistry about them and they don't know it. And that's the beauty of it. That's where the teacher in me woke up and said, wait a second, they have no idea of how amazing they are. And so I've been working on that, just helping kids, especially, to open up to the gifts that they have within, and be the lead players in their own work.
Well, Michelle, this is where Dr. Kelly and I, we just have so much similar background. The same with me. When I come in the classroom, I'm acting, and you have to engage the students any way you can engage the students. And then we have a California connection. Okay, I was out there in California in Costa Mesa, and he was right down the street. Not at the same time, but we still have that connection. And then my mentor, Dr. Linda Norfleet, got her PhD at UNC Chapel Hill in media studies. Hers was in performance studies.
Okay.
And she was trying to get me in there to do media studies, and I almost went. But anyway, being on stage is no different than telling a story. I tell my students this all the time. Talk to us a little bit about that transformation you try to put in students from them being just quiet to being able to express themselves.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
I say this a lot in my work. You cannot give someone something you don't already have. So I'm able to mentor and teach because I've been mentored and taught. My father was a teacher, as I said. I also have to give great credit to Mitchell G. Capel, Granddaddy Junebug, many people know him as.
Yes.
That man is a world-renowned storyteller, poet, artist, and just human. And he pulled me under his wing. The first time I did a show at Cape Fear Regional Theater, well, the first time I did it, I had to play a bit part of something. But the first time I had a real role was when we did To Kill a Mockingbird. And I was young. I was in my 20s there. And I remember Mitch, he didn't have as much gray in his beard as he has now. He would sit, and I played Tom Robinson, a very noble, dignified character. And it's a very, very tragic character, right? What happens to Tom Robinson, man who gets lynched, essentially. And I would remember, I would sit before I was getting onto the stage. I would just sit in the dark, and Mitch would come and just speak poetry to me. He would say Paul Lawrence Dunbar poetry. He would just share beautiful poetry and encourage me to honor our ancestors. And so he took me under his wing. And so I knew Mitch from there, but my life had adjusted, and I went to San Antonio with my wife. She was stayed in the Air Force. So I was an Air Force spouse, and I went to San Antonio. We came back. And when I came back, Mitch took me to, or challenged me to go to the National Association of Black Storytellers annual conference. And I went that year, and I just started dabbling in storytelling. They had an improv kind of session called the Liars Contest. And Mitch said, you should try it out. Well, I won the Liars Contest my first time there. I say all this to say that Mitchell Capel was the first human being who told me, and he tells me to this day, Sonny, you are a storyteller. And I always said, no, I'm a performer. I'm an actor. I'm a director. I'm a teacher. Storytelling, because I honor storytellers. I mean, they carry on our legacy, the legacy of the ancestors, right? They are the griots, the history keepers, the rememberers. And that's a great, I won't say burden, but it is a great honor. And it is a burden to carry on the stories of the ancestors and to tell stories that are going to make a difference. And I know Mitch Capel does that. And he would just tell me, you're a storyteller. And I finally gotten to that place where I own it. And I am a storyteller. And I teach my students and say, y'all, if you don't tell your story, no one else will hear it. And some people are saying some foolish stuff out there. They're saying ignorant things and hurtful things. And it's not always their intention. It's just because they haven't had a story that counters their story. So I want you to be empowered. If you tell your story, it can become our story, and we're all better together. And so oftentimes I notice that middle schoolers up. Well, check this out. So when we're working with little kids, I love doing storytelling with little kids because they know, they flow with it. So if I'm doing arts in schools, the Artists in Schools program with the Cumberland County Fayetteville Arts Council, I'll come in there to a bunch of kids. I did with Manchester Elementary School just a couple weeks ago, which I told a couple stories. They were with me. Man, we're doing call and response. They're with me. But something happens in middle school where we stop telling them to get up and learn with their bodies, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, knees. And we say, no, sit down, shut up, and learn. Then they get to high school. We say, sit down, shut up, and learn. And now you look like an adult. So start acting like an adult. Be responsible. If you mess up, we're going to break you down. And so we start to intimidate them and to encapsulate them. And they don't feel empowered. They don't feel agency.
Right.
They certainly don't feel a freedom to be creative because they get in trouble for it, right? And so what my job is to connect to community college students. And thank God I get to work with high school students at Fayetteville Tech as well. Those are honestly my favorite students because the high school students, they don't know what they're allowed to do yet. So they're trying to feel stuff out. So my message to my students is you are an expert in your own lived experience. I'm an expert in communication. Certainly I have a PhD in it. Give me the respect. Call me Dr. Kelly. No, I do have your grade in my hand, but you also have your grade in your hand, right?
Right.
You do A work, and I totally disagree with you and on every point you made and every speech, but you actually organized it. You researched it. You used all the gifts and tools.
Mhm.
You got an attention-grabbing hook. You are using poetry and flow, but I totally agree with every premise. I'm still giving you an A because you've learned what I need you to learn, how to express your story in the best way possible. So I tell my students, we all lose out if you don't share your story. Right. So
That's right.
whether that's in an argument or a relationship and you don't share your feelings and how you're feeling and be assertive, or if that's in a public speaking environment, there's nothing negative that can happen from you sharing your story in an assertive but gracious and loving way. So that's what I try to lead by example with, as I like to say, put my skin in the game and lead by example with in terms of telling my stories. And as in the show, The Talk, for example, I do a lot of crying because it's about my son. And it's about racism in America. And it's about fear.
Yeah.
And anxiety, concern, and my love for my country and my family. And so when I cry, I like to think that I'm giving masculine people in my space permission to hurt, permission to not be okay, permission to perform your imperfection and walk in it and own in it. And as I like to say, dance with it, right? We can erase trauma, but we can dance with it and we can start to manage it, right? So I tie all that together to say I just try to pull story. I've been called a story builder. I'm a story builder. I'm a storyteller, but I like to pull stories out of people. They don't even know they have stories.
Yeah, they don't.
Right.
Your grandmother made history, and you know her. You sat under her feet.
Right.
You realize what you've overcome in your life. You know, I've talked to a young lady. She literally saw her brother die, and is still standing and confident and looking after her little brother. Do you realize what kind of heroine you are, woman? And you're 16, but I'm gonna call you a woman because you are amazing. And she had no idea of how amazing she was. And so I said, let's put this into a poem. Let's put this into a story. And you don't have to share it with anybody. Just you got to go through that process of writing it down. And let's put some metaphor, some simile, some alliteration. Let's use some of the power of poetry. And then before you know it, they're like, Mr. Kelly, Dr. Kelly, Mr. Sonny, Brother Sonny, depending on the context. I want to share this. I want to get up. And I'm like, okay, come on, let's do it. And they're empowered, and then they empower other people who've been through what they've been through or who did not know their experience, but they're now enriched by this new expert knowledge, this expert testimony.
And I think that's amazing when you're starting with the middle schoolers and then the high schoolers, so that way they're getting that foundation. You know what I mean? So as they're starting out early, even though they may not realize that they are a storyteller or an activist, but you're planting that seed. And I think that's amazing because a lot of times when the students get to, we can all say we all worked at a university, they kind of, you know, they suppress that. And even in my class, I mean, I'm not theater, but I do have my students, hey, look, you got to think, you have to be creative. That creative will just, it stops running a little bit. Do you ever find that? Like when
you got to prime the pump.
You know, it's like it kind of, that phases out, that creativity phases out. And I think it is so important on any aspect, on any major, you still need that. And so for you and for Ken, to plant that seed in these students saying, hey, it's not too late. You know what I mean? Go get it. Start
It's never
creating.
too late.
Think about what's going on and start your storytelling.
And I
You
will
know,
say,
the hardest thing is to get them to talk, to express themselves, to say what's on your mind. If I asked you about blackface, if I asked you about minstrelsy, if I asked you about Mammy and Uncle Tom's and stuff, what do you think about that? You know, and getting them to talk, as Dr. Kelly said, is something because they have stories and they need to be able to tell their stories. And people respect you when you communicate.
They do. Stand your ground.
I definitely agree. But you know what, Ken? And also I think it comes from when they weren't getting that information. They weren't getting the knowledge of what those things are. Because if you think, or if you talk to the students, they may not talk. Is it that they're not, you know, discussing this, or it wasn't a discussion in their household from wherever background they came from? You know, I had to learn, unfortunately, I had to learn colorism early on when I was a kid. You know, having to, you know, to be dark skinned and to, you know, have a biracial grandmother, it was just like, wait, what is this? You know, but it's that right there is the conversation that takes place, you know, in the home. So that creativity, you know, both of you have displayed that, you know, Sonny, both of your parents were teachers
Right.
or educators, I would say.
Right.
You know, it just starts somewhere. So I think it takes for, I guess, like all of us, or you two especially, to keep that storytelling going.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? To share
Yeah.
that, because these students aren't getting a lot of students aren't receiving
Mm.
that or having that discussion.
And in theater that's what we do. We tell stories, right, Sonny? I mean,
Right.
every play tells a story. Every character might be just like your aunt or like your granddaddy or just like your brother.
Mhm.
And you got to be able to talk. It's almost psychology or sociology, or I don't know.
It's
But
all those things. I mean, the
yes,
reason why, there are several reasons why we think of Shakespeare as a genius, and people like Paul Laurence Dunbar as well. They had a way of putting words into these wonderful, beautiful formations and structures that really tap into your heart and your mind. But they were observers of society. They were sociologists, right? The things that you see Shakespeare writing about back in the 17th century are things that still impact us today. What it feels like to love someone and they don't love you back, how bitter that can
right.
feel, right? How jealousy can take over your mind and make you see things you don't see, Othello, right? Just down the line. And like he was talking about timeless elements of what it means to be human. And I think that he didn't just finish that process. He started that process. And the more you read people like him, the more you read people like Amiri Baraka, James Baldwin, you know, the more you start to tap into the fact that these thoughts, these experiences are not new. There's nothing new under the sun. I just have a new opportunity to express it in my way. It's not
Right.
done. The story hasn't been written and done and closed. It's begun. And so every new generation, we have a new generation of storytellers. And what I try to tell them is you're really all storytellers, whether you're in a
Yeah.
boardroom or you're teaching somebody how to change the chassis on a vehicle, or you are doing an HVAC. You can tell a story and it will connect to people and they will remember it better, right? And they'll be able to, like you said, Ken, they will respect you because they
Right.
respect that you put skin in the game. You were there. You had a testimony, you know?
Mm-hmm. And
Yes.
August Wilson, as a friend of mine had just said, tells some stories. That story of Fences is deep.
Fences.
It's deep. I mean,
Right.
you're gonna cheat on your wife, and you're gonna sit there and be able to tell her that.
And look at, and you know, I only know Viola Davis's rendition of, because that's only one. You know, that's the most recent performance of Fences that I've seen. But look at the strength of Viola and how August was showing the strength, the resiliency, the grace of Black women.
Right.
In our society, and how they have continually been the backbone. She was raising up people, raising up this young man and women for the future, in spite of the fact that the man was just trying to figure things out. And he was in cycles of abuse and poverty and addiction and his own self-inflicted pains, right? And how much has that been the experience of Black women in our society? So August Wilson's tenderness, and then you got to see, I don't know if y'all seen Amal Rainey's Black Bottom, but that piece right there, wow, God bless Chadwick and his wonderful last bit of work. Viola Davis, I mean, she don't get a nod for an Oscar and everything else.
Really?
They got that.
Really?
The strength, the resilience of our people, of humans, right? But we as Black people have been kind of, we've been in the petri dish of what the human capacity for grace and resilience are in this country, right? To show her defiance, her strength, to show his hope and his dreams, all of the complicated layers of identity and of ambition and of legacy and love and humanity that are in all of us. I feel like August really just sat in the Black experience and he just displayed it that honored our people. And that's why he is, I mean, for me, the playwright laureate of our people. There are many great Black playwrights, or many great playwrights who have expressed the African-American experience. But August, I've never read or performed in an August Wilson piece that I wasn't like, wow, he just did it. That's what we go through or have gone through, you know.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about your background, man. How you like Michelle said earlier, you've done film, you've done TV, you've done commercials, you've done theater. I mean,
I started early.
talk about your work, man. One of the films you did was you were supporting actor in Path of Life. You was in Stairway to Heaven. You were in Friday Night Lights.
Yeah, so I was in Friday Night Lights, a television show, and so what happened was when we went to San Antonio, I had to stop everything. So I was working for Fayetteville Urban Ministry in the Find a Friend program. I was recruiting mentors to work with kids, and I loved that work. It was my first job out of the Air Force. I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. I was still doing community theater whenever I could. Well, my wife got stationed in San Antonio, Texas, and we moved out there, and I was at this place where I said, what do I do with my life now? I was soul searching. And in that time, I got to find out there was an agent there. So I found out there was an agent. I said, well, maybe I'll go to what I know. So I got some pictures done, and I just started going on auditions. I was Tony Parker's body double in a couple of commercials. I could meet Tony Parker, the great basketball player from the San Antonio Spurs, because we are similar. He's 6'2", I'm 6. And
yeah,
so you can see the body. So it was great. So Tony would go to practice and stuff, and then I would wear the suit or whatever, be in the position that sometimes my hands would be in the picture, and then we'd tap out, be like, oh, thank you very much. Okay, I'll do the scene. Okay, all right, good to meet you. All right, then I'll just go. And so I was able to do some different acting jobs that way, and I had the opportunity to audition for Friday Night Lights, which was a popular show at the time, and it was shot in Austin, which was about an hour north of San Antonio. And so I drove up there and I auditioned, and I got the call back. I got the job, and I said, "This is like back in LA, but I'm in Texas now." So it was working well. And then I met some people who were doing independent films, and I auditioned for them. And they were not paying jobs, but they were a chance for me to just try some things. And so I got to play some characters I hadn't played before. And so Path of Life, I played an alcoholic, verbally abusive man who was trying to convince a woman who wanted to be a nun not to be one. That was very, very strange for me, because I'm always like the good guys. What's in me, you know? But it was nice. It was a nice challenge. And then I played a bouncer angel in
bouncer angel.
Where there was a man trying to get into heaven. And it was a soul searching film. Has he been living his life right? And I was at the gates like. With my beret on. No, not you, sir. So I got to play little small roles and go along the way. But here's what I realized was that these were fun and it was nice to be on screen, but I wanted more. And so I really did not get into theater when I was in Texas, because I just knew I wanted more. So I really dug deep into to honing my understanding of humanity and of teaching and who I was. So that's when I started pursuing my master's degree in communication studies at St. Mary's University. And I was so busy. And by the way, I just gotten a job about that same time. I got a job as a pharmaceutical sales rep, which is an acting job in and of itself, right? You have to talk to all these doctors about all these medical conditions and et cetera. So I had to learn how to get a script, cold read it, and present it in a way that looked like I knew what I was talking about. And I got smarter than I ever had been. In 6 months, I learned the body from the crown of your head to the sole of your feet. I knew all the systems: cardiovascular, pulmonary, thoracic. You know, I just knew all the parts. And then because Pfizer, you know, they came out with COVID-19 vaccine, so it's top of the game. When you're working for Pfizer,
right? It's really
they master at cutting people. Oh, you didn't pass the test, you're out. So you had to go through a very intense weeding process, and I really had to learn how to perform and think on my feet and be funny, right? So I was actually doing theater, but not on a stage. So I went about 8 years there where I was doing a little bit of TV. I had some stuff in San Antonio where I was doing commercials, body double for Tony Parker, did these small short films when I had time. But for the most part, for 3.5 years there, when I was doing pharmaceutical sales, I was turning doctors' offices into theaters. And people loved it when I came in, because
you were.
It was because I didn't know a limit. See, what I learned from all of my mentors and all of my directors in theater was you can't hold back. If you hold back, people won't believe you. You got to just unleash it. So I was like, well, I'm about to be the best salesman I can be. So I walk in there, I would learn everybody's name. I would just love on them, encourage them, because I'm like, I'm just glad to be here, you know. And before you know it, they're like, oh yeah, go see the doctor. He's our favorite. And I remember one time I sold Viagra. I remember one time I walked in the office, I put a cowboy hat on, and I tore off the label on the box, and I put it in the front. And people look, what are you doing? They would look at me like, why are you doing this? And I said, doctor, I just need you to know, I want all of your patients to feel like a cowboy when they use this medication. And I was so sincere. He was like, are you kidding me? I'm just saying, whatever it takes to make sure you put your patients back in the saddle again, that's what I want you to do. And he and she, all of them, they were so taken aback, and they bought into my commitment to the characterization and to the performance. And I knew my stuff now. I'd done the work.
Okay, I know you did.
You better know you better do your research and know the rigor of it all, right? I knew the pharmacokinetic nature of the molecule. I knew what it was, the comorbidities that it was associated with, and what it was prohibited from being. I knew all that stuff as well. So I had the respect, but I found a way to put some stank on it, as we say, to put some drama.
Put some stank on it.
So my thought is, if you can sell medications to people who are at the top of their field in ways that are funny and engaging, then you did something. So that really, I didn't realize it, but I was preparing myself to perform on a whole different level with that.
Oh, yes.
I'm on stage now. You can't throw me off. Let your cell phone ring. I'll incorporate it into the scene. I'll find a way, because I done been there, done that with the toughest crowds. You know, when a doctor sees a pharmaceutical sales rep, unless you got the nicest Viagra pen or a whole bunch of coffee and lunch, they don't want to see you. But I found a way to get people to want to hear my stories, and I would listen to their stories.
Right.
And that's when I learned that this economy of stories, this exchanging of stories, that's where relationship is built. That's where change is. I probably spent more time toward the end of my career as a pharmaceutical sales rep listening to doctors' stories. It was like they were just glad to have somebody who would listen to them and exchange in that energy. And I realized, oh, this is not about necessarily selling anything. It's about building relationship.
Right.
Got that. People buy from the people whom they like or love, right? So once I realized that, I knew I was dangerous. And then I came back. We came back in 2012 to Fayetteville. And that was Johnny Wilson, my executive director of Fayetteville Urban Ministry at the time. He called me and he said, hey, I would love for you to come back here and be a director of operations for me. So I started working with Find a Friend first, and I was directing Find a Friend for 6 months. Then he pulled me in as the director of operations. And then I felt very, I will say, kind of stilted, because I was not performing. You perform in some ways, but it was an office job.
You need to be on stage.
Yeah. What I would do, here's what I would do, is I would moonlight. I would go to Cape Fear Regional Theater and I'd do shows. And I would try to find, I had my own show that I wrote called Hope's Light. And it's a gospel play about a man who goes to prison. And it deals with fatherlessness in our community and getting a second chance, and how incarceration has really been a toxin in our communities. And it perpetuates these cycles. I was dealing with all these things. And at the time I was writing from my heart. I didn't realize academically I was actually applying some critical race theory. I was applying some discursive analysis and things we talk about later by just saying, this is what I see. Fatherlessness is a problem in our community.
It is.
The roots of it. Incarceration is a problem in our community. Lack of faith is a problem in our community. And so in Hope's Light, it was me kind of crying out saying, I see a problem. I've worked with youth. Oh, I got to say this. When I was in Texas, I was a youth pastor. And that also was an outlet, because I had the kids doing plays all the time. Yeah, okay. It was almost to the point where the church leadership was like, can you have the kids do a play like before the sermon? Because people are loving it. So that's how I was able to act, and then I was able to direct. So I would have these kids come up and they would do theater with me. They would co-write with me. So they were enacting the creative process in Sunday school, or in Bible study. We would say, well, let's put it on its feet. What does that look like? Let's imagine, what if you were Jesus in this case, And so that really helped me to be the creator that I am in a different outlet. So between going to doctors' offices, and then when I switched to youth pastor, between working with kids and talking to them and hearing their stories and realizing, wow, they have no idea of how amazing they are. Let me put them on stage and let them play another character who's amazing, even though it's really you. I found theater was a way of not only teaching our faith and building our spiritual heritage, but also opening up their hearts and minds to all that they could do and all that they could be, and how God saw them as a creator. I say this when I'm in more spiritually kind of spiritually open conversations with people. We were made in the image of our creator, who is a creator, which means we are creators. We are best when we are actually creating new ways of seeing things and expressing things, etc. So that's when I really merged the two, theater and youth work. When I was a youth pastor at a church, predominantly Black churches as well. So we know that kids who are raised in communities where they are seen as the Black kid, they oftentimes are told to sit down and shut up and be quiet, and they have to represent the whole race, and there's a lot of stigma and there are things like that going on. And so there's a lot of that to break down. And so I found theater was helping us to do that as well. And then when I came back to Fayetteville in 2012, I started doing some more community theater. And that's where I was realized there was a tension. I was working to help the people as a director of operations at a nonprofit, doing food and clothing and youth programming and helping helping them how to read. I mean, that's the hands and feet of Jesus kind of stuff.
There you go.
I wasn't doing it in the way that I could create. I was writing grants. And I was creating new ways of that would feed some of my desire. But I would spend my nights doing Shakespeare. We did Othello. So I got cast as Iago in Othello. So we did this wonderful little play of, kind of the infighting in the Black community where there was a Black Iago and a Black Othello. What happens when you are brother? I'm not my brother's keeper, right?
Right.
Tom Clayton's had this great idea. Tom Clayton's a white man, by the way, had this great idea of saying, let's make Iago and Othello Black men. Let's play with that.
Wow, now I would love to see that.
That was beautiful. I mean, that was one of the most challenging times of my life because I just moved back to Fayetteville. I was supposed to be doing this nonprofit thing, a life of purpose, but then this theater opportunity came up and I realized I still got that bug. I can't deny it. I got to go do it. So I was spending all night. My children were young. My wife was just getting settled in here as well. I spent a lot of time away from home, and I was very fatigued all the time because I was at rehearsal trying to learn these lines. And I don't know if you all know this. I didn't know it until I accepted the role. But Iago is like the third most verbose character of all of Shakespeare's characters.
Really, he is.
So I was like every other scene, and I was saying like soliloquies and monologues. That dude talks, and he's an amazing character, right? It's about how do you love someone so much that you begin to hate them. He loved Othello so much, but his jealousy over Othello not giving him attention that he wanted, he began to hate him, and he kind of took on this borderline personality disorder. It was amazing to play this maniacal yet deeply loving and profoundly faithful human being at the same time. And so that's when I started to realize, wow, when you play conflicted people, you give people permission to be imperfect. And you give yourself permission to be imperfect because you got to dig into the stores of all the mess that's inside of you. And that's so I played the snot out of Iago. I love playing that role. That was to this day, people are like, you're Iago. I'm like, yeah, I played that thing, didn't I? Because I dug deep. I did a lot of work. And so
I do want to tell you that your mom is watching and your wife is watching. And
hey, love y'all. That's a huge part of who I am. And I will tell you, speaking of my wife, I will tell you that it's so important to have an encourager all along.
Yes, it is.
There were so many times I was doing the show and I was like, I can't memorize these lines. And she's like, babe, you can do it. There's this old country song that says, she thinks I can rope the moon. And it's just a beautiful love song about how this man sees this man has this woman who sees him as someone who could rope the moon. He could do anything. And Elena Godbolt Kelly thinks I can do anything. And if she does, I just get up and say, well, she think I can do it.
Oh, that's sweet.
You talk about how my resume or my CV is so extensive. I've done all these things.
Yes.
A large number of the things that I've tried and done since I've met my wife have really been propelled by and fueled by her belief in me. And her thinking, well, babe, just try it. You can do it. You want to produce a play on your own and put it up and do it? Okay, hope's light. Hey, babe, you want to go get a PhD? Go take the GRE, go do it. And I'm crying like, I don't think I can do it. I want to quit. Remember, strong Black woman. I'm telling you, I love August Wilson's eye for what our community needs. And we need to honor and respect those strong Black women. And I'm so glad I have one. And I'm not, I don't mean to racialize things. We have people from all different backgrounds, strong people, right? But I know in my life and in my community, strong Black women have been our backbone. Don't get me started on Stacey Abrams. I'm just saying that for me, it's not just been me being a superstar and just look at me, I shine. There are times and days, even now, where I question myself as a playwright, a poet, a teacher, an actor, and I have someone who sees greatness in me, and she speaks that into me, and she prays that over me. And so the creator that is within me, given by the creator, is continually quickened, and that's why I get up and I have all this energy, and I just, okay, I'll do that, I'll do that. But now I will say I'm at a point now where I'm having to just pump brakes and say, I want to make sure I'm doing a lot of things, not just good things. Because there's plenty of projects I can get involved with, but there's only one of me. And I got 2 babies and a beautiful woman. I'm also here to serve as well. That's
right. You got to serve them too. But check it out, Michelle. We got to get into the talk. Okay. This show wouldn't be right unless we really get deep down into the talk now.
Okay, the talk.
So talk to me about what you have to tell your son, man, when he gets, go ahead.
Just for those folks who are exploring their careers and their place in theater and in the arts, I do want to say that once I realized there was a tension between my purpose and my passion, I realized I had to reconcile the two because I was coming to work at Fayetteville Urban Ministry and I was exhausted. And I was trying to do both. That's when I realized, okay, I've got to pursue this all the way. That's when I decided to get the PhD at UNC Chapel Hill. And part of me wanting to get the PhD was I wanted to do performance that made a difference in the world. My mentor, one of my many mentors, Renee Alexander, Alexander Craft, when I was at UNC Chapel Hill, every time I would present to her a performance piece or an idea about how I wanted to work with kids and do poetry and performance ethnography, she would tell me, okay, that's great and that's wonderful. Now let me ask you a question. What is that going to do in the world? And I'll never forget that question. I ask my students that to this day. What is your work going to do in the world? And it could do anything. I just wanted to, I want you to know what it's going to do. And I want you to, as Stephen Covey would say, begin with the end in mind, right? So when I was at UNC Chapel Hill, my first 2 years was spent just focusing on the My Life Matters project and working with youth in the Find a Friend program. At the time, Shauna Hopkins was in charge of the program. Wonderful, wonderful thinker, heart for the people, for kids especially, amazing gift for working with kids. And she came up with that term, My Life Matters, because she said, Sonny, you know, people talking Black Lives Matters and racializing things and politicizing things. Let's just deal with the kids and meet them where they are. And let's just talk about their lives mattering. So I started doing that work with her. And over the summer of 2016 and 17, we were doing poetry workshops. And that was all I was going to do. That was my dissertation. That was my research. This is how I was going to use performance and my passion toward purpose, right? Then I started chewing on this conversation I had with my son back in 2015. He was 7 and we were driving to school, or I was driving. It would be illegal for him to drive, Ken. I was driving to school. And he's in the back seat, and we're listening to the story of riots in Baltimore. And long story short, the source of all the riots and the protests and the destruction and the pain and the hurt was one Black man. And when I realized that Freddie Gray's story could easily be my son's story, someone who's misrecognized on the street, they think he's a criminal, they grab him, they're too rough with him, they're not careful with his body because they don't realize how precious it is because it's a Black body, and they're fungible, replaceable. You know, that's how traditionally treated in this country. And they're oftentimes criminal anyway. So maybe he deserved to get banged up a little bit. That's what people say, right? Well, I got this 7-year-old and he's going to be a big, beautiful Black man one day. And it just hit me in this one split second. I got to talk to him about what it means to be in this body. Now, most people will love and respect you for who you are. You're sterling. You're beautiful. You're a bright star. You're a little star, as your name means, pure and thoroughly excellent. But some people with power, people with pistols, are going to see you as a Black man first and foremost. How do I encapsulate all of that, all of the protective energy of the ancestors, right? And just present it to this boy in a way that's going to protect him. And over the course of maybe 60, 80 seconds, I told him something. And I remember it wasn't until a couple weeks later, I was in downtown Fayetteville and I started to just recollect and process that conversation I had with this beautiful, innocent boy. And I was just weeping. I remember I was on my phone, I was walking, and people probably thought I was out of my mind because I was just weeping. And I started typing on my phone what I remember saying to him, what I felt. It was almost like, it's what I tell my students to do, just a free writing session. I was just writing whatever's on my heart, right? And the more I wrote, the more I cried. But the more I took on this kind of steely vision, like something's got to happen with this. I got to do something. And when I read it over in my notes in my phone, I said, there's got to be something more. And in the midst of this, I am just starting my PhD. And I thought, well, I'll put it on the back burner. I'll put some notes to the side. Well, for everything, there's a season, right? So about 2 years into my program, I'm still working on the talk and I'm just kind of workshopping it. And I'm telling people the story. So I'm doing stories with the National Association of Black Storytellers and the Black Storytellers Alliance out in Minnesota. And I'm sharing a little elements. I call it Sterling Story, like a little 8-minute piece. Mitch Capel and I do a show called The Color of Courage. If you haven't seen it, you need to check it out. Go to sonnykelly.com. More. So Mitch Capel and I do this beautiful piece that we've done in churches, schools, and auditoriums where we talk about the over 180,000 Black soldiers who literally fought for their freedom in the Union Army during the Civil War. We check that myth that Abraham Lincoln was the great white hope and he freed us, and we were just sitting there in chains waiting to be free. We were fighting too, right? And so that's a very empowering piece. And at the end of the piece, Mitch was capable. He was gracious enough to allow me to do Sterling Story, just to say how these stories continue in our lives. And so that's where I kind of got the story on its feet as a performance piece. But about the 3rd year into my PhD, I realized this is part of my work because I was performing it. And then I met Joseph Meagle, who is the director of the piece and was also one of my professors at UNC Chapel Hill and is one of my mentors. Joseph heard it while I was performing the little snippets. And he said, you need to take my class. I have a class at UNC Chapel Hill and developing original work. And this thing right here, and he was crying from the first time he heard it. He said, this thing right here is something.
You took that class.
So I took that class twice. I took it twice. And we developed a piece with feedback from my fellow students, from my classmates, from my wife, from my family, as I just kept working on it and failing forward. I would say something and it wouldn't quite work. I would write something that would be funny when I didn't want it to be funny, or something, I found a place to put comedy and drama and develop an arc to the story. So over the course of about 2 years, I was able to develop a script. So in 2018, Joseph Meagle sponsored my launching of the talk. We did it at Swain Auditorium as a kind of student show, as part of the work that they do there in the communication department at UNC Chapel Hill. And we packed the house. We did one weekend and literally it was standing room only, and because people wanted to talk about this thing. Black folks were having the talk with their kids and didn't know how to address it. We weren't even naming it. We were just having the talk. We didn't call it the talk. We just, but then white folks, you would talk about the talk and they thought it was birds and bees. So it was. So how do you battle with someone who doesn't even understand the term? So what the show was doing was it was putting my story into action, and I was bringing in my dad. I play like 22 different characters. So I'm playing my mom, my dad, and Michelle, to your point, my mom is a light-skinned woman with what they call good hair, right? Wavy hair, right? Yeah. She also has hazel eyes. So she was often mistaken as a white woman growing up, but she grew up in Compton in a black community. So she was on the outside looking in or on the inside looking out, depending on how you, right? So there were all these layers of privilege and identity and colorism and the one drop rule. My grandmother has blue eyes, and the only person who is 100% sure she's more black than white is her. Everybody else is like, no, white. But I love you, but grandma got soul. What was that?
I said it depends on how they comb their hair that day.
It depends on how you comb your hair, exactly, and how and what environment you're in. So I learned about context from my mother, right? Depends on the environment, how you use your tone, etc. So as I was writing the script of the talk and performing it, I was engaging in an academic venture. I was studying the history of my people having to, what I say, share this discursive heirloom, this undesired discursive heirloom with our children. We had to share this conversation that other communities don't have to have. And there's a certain formula to how we do it. And as we think about that formula, we think about all the elements, the variables, the one drop rule, stop and frisk, the school to prison pipeline, the love for our children and the desire to maintain their innocence. But the fact that a black child in America doesn't get but so much innocence, because we got to get you prepared, right? So all these things that just fell on me like a ton of bricks and had me weeping, I was able as an academician, or in that case, as a scholar, a PhD student, to really process it and look at some of the writings of Stuart Hall and look at some of the writings of Paul Gilroy and other people who had been taking a critical approach to what race is in the Western world and put words to it. W.E.B. Du Bois, then poetry, James Baldwin, right? And Dr. Mays, who wrote, I've only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it, right? Benjamin E. Mays. And so I started pulling from the rich cultural stores of my people as I was trying to articulate how I felt about my beautiful baby and trying to hold on to hope for him into an uncertain future. And so I didn't realize this was so much bigger than a little story about me and my son, or my son and me, to use proper English, right? This was a story about my people, my country. And when I say my people, not just my black people, but my people. Aspirationally, I want all people to be my people. And I want us to all be colorblind one day, but we're not now. So let's acknowledge that. So what I found was, as I was performing the talk, and Joseph Meagle did this excellent job of directing me to meld between the characters. He wanted me to stop making the show. He said, "You're a great performer. That's wonderful. But I don't want you to pivot between characters and show what a great performer you are. That's not what this is about. It's bigger than you. I want you to show and not tell. Don't just write up and tell everybody. Just show, just be in the moment." And so we wrote in these pieces of call and response, which I use in storytelling, these engagements with the audience. There's a time before COVID-19 where I would run through the audience, give people high fives and touch them, and our bodies would touch. And you had to deal, because that's how I did it at FSU. You had to deal with each other. I challenge audience members to look into the eyes of someone who does not look like, live like, or love like, and just acknowledge that we're a beautiful family. And also acknowledge that we have some serious issues we need to deal with. And these moments of reckoning that are not as jarring as you thought they would be, they allow people to relax just enough to let their walls down, just enough to let your story become our story. And now we're starting to talk about problems and issues and situations in a collective way. So it's ministry. It's done something, and it does something in ways I never could have designed on my own. So in the end, my dissertation was about 500 and something pages long, because the first part of it was, this was the work I did with the youth in Fayetteville. This is what I learned. This is the work I did on myself and what I learned about my people. and empowering people through the talk. So the talk work that I did in my dissertation was an audience analysis, a discursive analysis of even how I wrote the play. So much of what I wrote was, in my opinion, my understanding, it was divinely motivated and inspired. So many things that I wrote, so many mirrors, images, and parallelisms, etc. I didn't design on purpose. I wonder if Shakespeare wrote that way. He's like, oh, that was a great idea. Oh, very nice. And so all these things are coming out to me now. And even audience members will tell me, did you realize you did that? I'm like, no, I didn't. Thank you. Let me lock that in. So what I found is that people who are white don't just walk out of the show feeling guilty. They feel encouraged to have the conversation. They feel challenged. They feel convicted, as I want them to feel. But it's some generative emotions that they're feeling. Like, let's do better. People who are black feel affirmed. Like, I'm not the only one. Thank you. Or, I do my grandmother. We call her Ma. And she said, get your lesson. And I love it when somebody says, my grandmother, Ma, she used to say, get your lesson too. Or, I used to have experience. And so we have these points where we can touch and agree because, as you said so beautifully earlier, Ken, we all have a story. We just have to share it. So sometimes we share our story, which the talk is certainly a performance, but it's more importantly a storytelling session. We share our story. We empower others to share theirs. And we're always better when we share our stories and let them become truly our stories, right? So the talk is.
The name of the dissertation, real quick, Michelle, is Pipelines to Pathways: Reframing and Reclaiming Black Youth Identity Through Performance. That says it all right there. Michelle, you got some?
Yeah. So when you did the talk, right? Or let's say when you had the talk with your son, sometimes when we talk to our children about some challenging topics, especially with, let's say, police brutality. How are you able to deliver that message without scaring your son? Because, sometimes kids be like, oh, I'm scared, and not really understanding what's really going on. Like, I don't want to go out there and then having the thought of, oh, I'm going to get, harassed or... You know what I mean? Like, how are you able to deliver that, not only with your son, but students who are around that age or old, or I would say around that age at that time where they can understand, but yet not be afraid?
That's a great question. And people oftentimes will ask me that question. People of children of all different racial backgrounds, how do you express and explain race and racism to a child without stealing their innocence? I can't tell you that I did it perfectly. On that day, I was desperate and my gut just told me I had to have some talk with him. So I did tell him I need him to be better and always to have his hands clean and just be polite. And I don't want him to be stigmatized like that. At the same time, as a protective father, I don't know if there's any other way but to say that. I think if I could go back in time, and I have had the chance because I've processed it through the play and I've talked to a lot of kids about this and my sons as well, I would just stress to them the fact that you are not the problem. You never were the problem. You never will be the problem. Now, if you acting up and being a fool, then your foolishness is a problem. But you and your race and your body showing up, that's never going to be the problem. Racism is the problem. The race of other people is not the problem. Racism is like COVID-19. We should all protect ourselves from it because we're all susceptible to it. Black people can be racist against black people as well. That happens on a regular basis. I remind people all the time, the 6 officers who were responsible for the life of Freddie Gray when he took on that forceful trauma and ended up in a coma and dying. Those were 6 officers. They were 6 humans. 3 of them were of African descent. That tells me that when people dishonor and disrespect people's bodies based upon their race, it doesn't matter what the race of the person is. If you devalue blackness or you devalue black bodies or black lives, then that is something that it has infected our entire society. Yes. And I also stress the fact that most people, I hope, at least in my experience, most people will love you and respect you and honor you, and they won't be distracted or dissuaded by your racial background, but some will, right? So what I just say to young people is just remember, yes, there are dangers out there, but we need to look at racism as a bug. It is a toxin. We got to keep it out of our own systems because we are indeed susceptible being racist against anybody. I don't agree with, and we could talk later, but I don't agree with the definition that black people can't be racist because we don't have the power. I get power structures, but you can be racist by making decisions based on race. If you come onto the basketball court and you're a white guy, I tell my son, you see a white guy come onto the court or something, you don't get to call him a white boy and say he can't jump. That is racist to me. But that's a whole different conversation. I think if you continue to perpetuate that kind of language, you're part of the problem. So we're all susceptible. So we got to realize that some people who are in power have been infected by that. And we've got to find a way to either neutralize the threat or get out of that space and move on and realize I am not the problem. You are infected. I feel sorry for you. I'll pray for you. I will have you punished if I can. But I also want my kids to know that if someone asks you a question that makes you a little uncomfortable, sometimes it's just because they don't know. So ignorance should be addressed with education, not with punishment all the time. If, for example, someone says, why doesn't your hair get wet? Does your hair get wet? Oftentimes, especially if it's a kid, it's not a question born out of racism. It's a question born out of ignorance. I just don't know. So somebody's got to tell them. Somebody's got to tell their story. So I tell my kids, be open, keep your eyes open, look where you can still tell stories. When you see people who are going to be a danger to your body and you can tell they're infected with that racism, then you go ahead and handle that. You do it the smartest way possible. If you're pulled over by a police officer, for example, the time to handle that is not curbside. It's memorize that badge number, memorize the patrol and the name of the person, and we'll go handle that the right way. Right. Yeah. So that's what's been good for me. I will say, I want to give a shout out to Rhonda Taylor Bullock and Kelvin Bullock. They run a program called We Are out of Durham. And it is a program that trains up kids over the summer and summer camps against racism, to train all diverse backgrounds to deal with, address, and name racism. And I did a portion of the talk for them a couple years back. And I remember doing the Emmett Till part, which is a tough part. Talk about Emmett Till and what really happened to him. And one of the children stood up, and then I think she must have been a second, third grader. She said, I'm scared. And that checked me, because I've been doing the show, like everybody needs to hear it, do the talk. And I realized you've got to temper it, especially with young people. You don't go right into the blood and the lynching, et cetera. You need to express that. But young people just say, you know what? There's something that can kill us all. It's called racism. So let's all be careful that we protect each other from it. So I stopped everything there. I said, I don't want you to be scared. You're beautiful. You're wonderful. You are right where you're supposed to be. We just need to all be careful and make sure we're not part of the problem, right? But we do need to navigate through this situation. And the more we share our stories and the more we connect with each other, the more protected we are against this bug of racism.
You know,
so with
one of the
writing
things
and your activities that you just hold. So my question to you is, with everything that's going on, has that fueled you to write something else, or are you currently working on projects?
That was prescient of you. Yeah, I am. I'm working on a project now called Haunted. I've been chewing on this notion of blackness and this discussion that people are having, this false enmity between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. They can indeed coexist, and they should. Right. Black lives have not traditionally mattered to people in this country. It's just a fact. Look at the numbers. Look at how we operate. Look at poverty, et cetera. Look how we treat Black bodies. We as a society, not every individual, right? So we know that Black lives have not traditionally mattered as much as white lives in this country. And so Black Lives Matter is an important thing to state, to say they should matter as much as, not more than, but as much as. Traditionally, they have not mattered, right? And so I want to get the conversation away from this adversarial Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, and get into the fact that the real problem is that Blackness has been a marker for centuries in the Western world for fungibility. Fungibility is the word I learned in my PhD. For, you can replace it easily. It's just, one dies, just make another baby and you put them back on the road, right? So for animality, for high pain tolerance, for violence, for crime, for poverty. So our Black bodies already speak. They walk with a script already on them that speak these things to people. And when they're read, oftentimes when we get hurt, we get injured, et cetera, people say, well, that's just, it's just another Black body. They don't say it consciously. They're loving, wonderful, benevolent people. But subconsciously, it's ingrained in us, anti-Blackness. So I don't want to focus so much on white supremacy. That's a problem. We need to handle that. People need to handle that. I want to focus on anti-Blackness, because that's what hurts me so much. And I find anti-Blackness even amongst Black folks. Yeah. My wife, one of the most important things my wife ever told me was that my wife's beautiful, stunning, right? But she told me that when she was a child, she was told at times, you're cute or you're pretty for a Black girl, for a dark girl.
For a Black.
Right, Michelle, what you've experienced. That's not a compliment.
Yeah, right.
So this notion of people actually think they're complimenting you when they say something like that. That's because it's like it's understood. Blackness is the base. It's wrong. It's bad. We all agree, right? We don't.
It's not even.
It's not even. And so the show that I'm writing now called Haunted has been commissioned by the Orange County Community Remembrance Council and also the Carborough Arts Center, as well as the Orange County Arts Council. They've commissioned me to do this piece. We were supposed to do it actually last May, but COVID-19 happened. But on March 27th, actually, I'm going to perform it at the Carborough Arts Center, but it will be televised via Zoom or some platform. We're still working on that. But March 27th at 2 p.m., mark your calendars. We're still getting the marketing together. We just solidified that date. I'll be performing a one-man show called Haunted, one man's journey through the conversations and the experiences that help us to understand what Blackness has meant, what it means, and what it should and can mean going forward. So I tell the story of Manly McCauley, a man who was lynched in Chapel Hill when he was found running away with a lover who was a married white woman. So he was 18, she was 27. They ran away. We don't know all the details, but I try to fill in some of those gaps with some creativity and just acknowledge the fact that his Blackness is what gave them permission to lynch him. His Blackness is what got every one of his lynchers off, and everybody went away like nothing happened. His ex-lover, or whatever you might want to call her, she went on to stay married, had more children, had 15 grandchildren, lived a lovely life. She died in her 80s. Her husband died. Her husband, the lyncher of Manly McCauley, died at 94, but Manly died at 18. And he died only days before the Wilmington massacre. That was a big election. We just came out of a big election season. So what I do is I digest the fact that our first Black senator was back in 1870. He was from Fayetteville, by the way, right? Hiram Revels. Man was raised in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He was a Black senator from Mississippi. We forget this. We had Black senators and congressmen back in the 1800s. And then Jim Crow descended upon us when the federal government pulled out of the South and let us be, because Blackness just didn't matter so much to them. They knew what was going to happen to us. They knew the racists that were here, the people who were angry, the angry Confederates were going to run roughshod on us. And they did for decades later. But Blackness has never had the social capital, the visibility in a positive way that it needed to in order for Black people to be properly humanized, dignified, and treated as equals. So my conversation is not about anger, but just marking where Blackness has marked us in different ways and the possibility of changing those labels and those marks, I guess in my case, through performance, right? Through telling our stories and performing them.
You know what? We're about out of time, but I really need for you to talk to people who want to get into theater. Sonny, being a teacher, and you probably more vocal than me, and I'm passionate too. Now. You know, I met somebody.
We should get together. We should guest lecture.
My students, you know, theater is just like any other field. Yeah. You know, I've had 2 careers which I love doing, and you got to be able to study, get your degree, and get out there and perform, but they don't know how much work is involved. Can you talk to people who are trying to get in theater and tell them? I can't tell them.
Or
you know?
Where to start.
Where to start.
And I'm gonna tell you, you know, nothing worth having ever came without hard work. Where to start is to start to sharpen your chops, as we say in the industry, you know, whether you got chops or not, whether you got the gift. And the gift really comes from you working it. Now, some of us are naturals. I'm a naturally charismatic, you know, outgoing person, but I wasn't a naturally strong actor. I didn't start to lead in plays till I got out of college and started doing some things. I started doing it for free. If you are willing to do it for free, if you are driven, if you are like I was with that cell phone in the middle of Hay Street, just typing and crying because you got something to say. We all got something to say, but if you can find a way to channel that into your poetry, your performance, and just start to work on it without getting paid, without being gratified, even if you have naysayers, that's how you know you've got something. And what happens is the more that you start to build on that thing and work it, my wife and I were just talking about the power of discipline. If you're faithful in a few things, God will make you master over many. And what happens is you start to build mountains. Our lives are full of pathways, full of molehills that we started, a passion that we had, a story I want to tell, a person I met, and then we just got dissuaded, distracted, discouraged, and then we moved on and we made another molehill somewhere else. But if you would just work on that molehill, just a few pieces at a time, write a scene, right? That's how I've been working with Haunted. I've been working on piece by piece, and I've been learning so much about the history. I've had to do historical research, but also develop some scenes, also develop myself as a playwright and an actor, and kind of consider how does my body get into this character and props and things. I just bit by bit, not the complete product, but just bit by bit, you'll find you are honing your craft and you'll be better and stronger. And before you know it, you'll have a show like The Talk, or like I now will have Haunted. That's a full show that will do things in the world you never thought they would do, because bit by bit, you are building up that discipline, right? And building up in the discipline, right? A discipline is also a field of study. So you need to learn, you need to read, you need to actually do difficult things like Shakespeare. Ooh, that'll cut your teeth. Volunteer to be in plays and to read in class and to do projects that are out of your wheelhouse, that make you uncomfortable. It's okay to fail. Failure is great. It lets you know what you need to work on, but also it always makes you stronger. Always makes you stronger. So for those who get into theater, I say just be willing to do it for free. Do the work and discipline yourself and finish the work. Whatever you're working on, whether it's a scene or a poem or a whole play, finish it. Make that thing into the mountain it's supposed to be and see what it does. And then just get that thick skin on and put your skin in the game and start shopping it. Share it with people. Can I do it as a student production? Can I maybe try to do a couple scenes in your class? One of my favorite people on the planet, Damari. Damari was a young man I worked with My Life Matters Project. He literally wrote a beautiful poem about wanting more in life. He shut down his biology class, which he wasn't doing too well in, by the way. Shut down his biology class. He said, teacher, I want to read this poem. Can I read it? And he got everybody in the class to kind of stage a mutiny to say, no, we want to hear his poem first. She said, okay. By the time he read it, she was there in tears. She had him say it in his English class. And the way he explained it to me is like, Mrs. Sonny, I went savage. In a good way. And I loved it. I learned the new words from the kids too. And I learned that there was something so powerful, not only about him writing the poem, not only about him sharing the poem with his mentor and teacher, but about him commanding the space and sharing that story in a public place that could light on other people. Even his biology teacher wasn't even her discipline, right? And so that kind of thing, you got to find ways to share it and just put your thick skin on. Not everybody's going to get you, but you keep working it. Ask for their feedback. Find out what can be better. How can I adjust? Did you believe that character? What can I do? And if you look for that feedback, iron will sharpen iron. You'll get better, you'll get sharper, and you'll look up and say, wow, I am what I always wanted to be. I'm an accomplished performer, actor, and I'm finding fulfillment in this work. I'm not running around scared, trying to go from job to job and prove something. So when you start to go into auditions, Tay Diggs said this a while back, when you go into auditions, you got to know I'm walking in here with purpose. Give me the job or don't. I just want to come in here and do what I do. And if you don't give me the job, it means nothing about me. It means that you just made a bad choice. I'm going to the next one, right? That takes those nerves. You should always have a little nervousness. But it takes nerves down, because when you're driven by purpose, you know
I tell it, when you walk out on stage and the light hit you, you better embrace that,
And I will
show you who I am. Okay.
I will say this, the one error that someone can make in my public speaking class that I will just get on them about is apologizing. You do not apologize. When it's your time to shine, it's your time to shine. You flub, you mess up, you go blank, roll with it, figure something out and keep it moving. That's the power of performance, is being able to stay alive and connect to the audience, connect to the text and keep it moving and keep it living, even if you have to improv the rest of the scene, right? But don't apologize to me, because guess what? You ought not apologize for being here. You're here for a purpose, for such a time as this. You stand up and you speak the truth that is in you, that you're called to do, and create something if you have to, but you ought not ever have to apologize for being you.
Well, Michelle, we have to name this Theater Talk Part 1 for Dr. Sonny Kelly. Because we just got like a smidgen of you, man. So
thank you
for sharing and coming on. And again, we'll have you back again. And Michelle, you got final thoughts?
I'm just taking. I mean, because
I've seen Sonny
perform, and
to God be the glory.
It's one thing, to have our conversation, Sonny, and then to, even during this time, I felt your passion, and I understand why you are a storyteller. The excitement that you have, the deliverance that you have. I'm sitting here thinking, like, where are you teaching at next?
Right. Come on over to NCCU, man. And you know what? You inspired me. He's inspired me. I'm stuck in a play that I'm writing, and now I'm getting up and I'm gonna use the phone. Just like you said, I'm gonna start talking my scenes into my phone and then send it to myself by email, so that I got stuck. So now I'm unstuck now. I feel great.
And refuse to leave a trail of molehills behind you. That's something new that just came to me right now. That was y'all. That was us that's in this quick. Refuse to leave a trail of molehills. Finish it up. It's worth it.
That's right.
Worth your time.
You know what? You inspired me. So I honestly, and I will share this evening, I had to do a self-tape audition for a show. And I would say theater is not my thing. Modeling is. But when they asked me to do a self-tape, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll try it. This evening, Yes, I'm inspired because I was a little discouraged, and you're saying,
Hmm.
don't apologize. And I'm like,
Right.
oh my God, I'm so sorry. There was,
Mm.
yeah, no, I'm not going to apologize, but
And I will
definitely
tell you,
inspirational.
much like the young lady who spoke at the inauguration, Gorman, first name,
Amanda.
we'll call her Miss Amanda. Amanda, worthy of love, by the way. Their name Amanda means worthy of love. I love that. But Amanda, she stood up for every chocolate girl in the world, and for me too. And she spoke truth. And so just realize when you go into that audition, there's a purpose. We need you visible. You need to be there with your brilliance, your intelligence, not just your skin. I'm not just, but I mean your intelligence, your brilliance, the fact that you're a mother and a scholar and a professional, and you bring something into the space. So you coming in there for that audition is not only getting an opportunity, but you're doing them a favor, and you're doing the rest of us a favor. When you increase your visibility, we have something we can look at and say, okay. My wife and I were just talking about this. Christ said, if I be lifted up, all people will be drawn unto me. Well, if Christ is in you, he's being lifted up when you're lifted up. So you're walking in there on purpose, on a mission. It ain't even about you. Well, it's not even about you.
Right.
Just go in there and
Oh,
make
you
it
about
do
to
it.
start? Okay, look.
Come.
You gotta
He can ready to preach now. Come on.
And that's where I get the energy from. My name means Sonny. It means little boy. And I hated that name my whole life, but it means little boy because I bring this little boy energy because God has blessed me with it. But as long as I'm tapped into purpose, nothing can stop me. Go ahead and cancel me. Go ahead and shut it down. Somebody else, somewhere else is going to take this mountain because it's in me. It's coming out.
All right. Well, I'm going to be emailing you because me and you got to have to get together. I mean, now that we're going to do some things together. And Michelle, thank you. And we're going to leave the audience with the little clip I played earlier. And thank you for joining us on Theater Talk Live. We went a little over, but I'm happy. I'm very happy.
It's been a joy. Thank y'all for having
Yes,
me.
Dr. Sonny Kelly. So if you guys will mute and we will play this little clip.
America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain seeking go home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Hi, my name is Sonny Kelly. I'm a scholar, writer, and an actor. I'm also the proud husband of Elena Kelly and the proud father of Sterling and Langston Kelly. And I'm the performer and writer of The Talk. I was having a conversation with my son one day. At the time, he was 7 years old, and I was taking him to a typical day of first grade. And we heard on the radio about riots in Baltimore, and the cause of all this was Freddie Gray.
The violence erupted after a funeral was held today for 25-year-old Freddie Gray. He died a week ago after being severely injured in police custody.
That moment, I had the revelation, the understanding that I had to somehow convey to my son a warning that one day he would be a black man in a world where life is oftentimes tough and dangerous, precarious. And so in that moment, I had what is commonly known as the talk with him, kind of preparing him for a world where he is seen as a threat oftentimes just because of the color of his skin. So The Talk is a dynamic one-man show that includes a performance of one person in a room with a group of people for about an hour and 20 minutes, playing over 20 characters, bringing in images, sound, literature from people like Langston Hughes, W.E.B. Du Bois, James Baldwin, and then closing out with a really important conversation with the audience afterward. You know, one thing that's really important to me is that everybody knows that The Talk is for you. It's for every demographic that you can imagine. And the reason why is because it's about people being marginalized and striving to be humanized mutually, to humanize each other. And one of the best compliments that anyone ever paid me was a white man who stood up in the middle of an audience after the show was over. We've laughed, we cried, we had all these wonderful moments. And he said, I want to thank you for calling me in and not calling me out. It's about us getting in a room together, having tough conversations, and staying in that room and calling each other in to community. It's about community building and unity building.
So we're going to see y'all later. And thank you for for joining us on Theater Talk Live. See you later.
Thank you all. Bless you.
All right, bye.
Bless you.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
one.